Welcome to Food is Fuel episode 4. Today I'm going to be talking about weight loss and I'm going to be giving a numbers perspective. And just before we begin, I'd like to thank you all for watching these videos. I've been having a great deal of fun and I'm looking forward to putting one of these out a week. And it would be really appreciated if you have a question that you would like me to answer, or maybe a topic you would like me to cover, or perhaps you have a friend, a family member, or a colleague who has a question or a topic. Please send those through. It would be an absolute honor for me to be able to go through and answer those questions. So today we're sort of continuing on from last week a little bit. We're still looking at the Fat Blaster Shake. And the reason I'm looking at it is I've discovered they have an 8-week program and they've got some pretty ambitious claims on their packaging that we can lose between 1 to 2 kilograms per week by using their shakes. And I was like, that's an impressive amount of weight loss. I want to know more. So I looked into it and I found this disclaimer on the packet and I immediately got angry, and it was, this product is best taken in conjunction with regular exercise and a healthy, balanced diet. And that sort of disclaimer is everywhere. Manshake has a similar one. And then they've got an FAQ, and the first question in their FAQ is, do I need to exercise? And they gave the most weaselly answer. I could have been convinced Manshake was actually run by a political party, because their response was, you don't need to exercise to see results from the Manshake program. However, we do recommend you do exercise for the additional health benefits. Then we've got Saxenda. This is a prescription medication to help with weight loss in obese people. And again, at the very top of their page, must be taken in conjunction with increased physical activity and a calorie-restricted diet. And as soon as I see that, I begin to wonder, well, do you need the shake? Do you need the medicine? Because if you've got if you're exercising regularly and you're eating a healthy, balanced diet, I don't see how you need this extra thing on top of that. Here's a quick example. Let's say I'm having some relationship dramas and I decide I really need to get my act together. So I start every day. I've got either a flower delivered to my significant other at work, or maybe it's a treat that they like, or I'm baking their favorite foods and I leave them a nice handwritten note each day. And at the same time, I've also swapped to a new cologne. And then a month has passed and everything's patched up. My relationship's never been better. And I start telling all my friends how it was the Pierre Cardin cologne that saved my relationship. Everyone would think I was either insane or just a really deceptive person, or I'd been paid off by Pierre Cardin. So bear that in our minds when we're looking at these products, especially the Fat Blaster one, which I reviewed last week. There's not a lot in them that will actually evaporate or fat blast the fat. It's basically just a calorie restrictive meal. And if you're going to have that on top of a regular balanced diet and exercise, I don't see the need for it. So let's look at some of the math behind it. Just at the highest level, there's 9 calories per gram in fat, which means there's 9,000 calories per kilogram of fat. And so I started to look at the two different options of the Fat Blaster 8-week program, I guess, if you will. And I was like, well, let's look at the rapid weight loss. That's 2 kilograms per week. There's about 8 weeks until Christmas. Some people would be really tempted by that. You're going to have to see the family. Perhaps you let yourself go over winter. And that would be really great. And then almost immediately, I noticed that there was a gap. And when you read their own numbers, the difference between the rapid weight loss and the steady weight loss is the rapid weight loss is you're eating about 300 less calories per day. And I was like, well, over a week, that equates to 2,100 calories. And that's much less than the extra 9,000 I would need to have reduced my intake by to lose that extra kilogram. And I was like, oh yeah, perhaps that's why they put the disclaimer on, that I would need to do extra physical activity. So I had a look at it and I found some averages on roughly over it's an average population. So your numbers are going to vary, but it's a good indicator of how much additional exercise you would have to do to fill in that gap. And you would have to do, I think it's about 10 hours of intense physical activity a week to lose the 2 kilograms on top of however much exercise you need to do under the steady program. So I was like, okay, their math is just basically really wrong. So let's start from scratch. I'll do it for them. So if we want to, I put some numbers out. I was like, well, if I want to lose half a kilogram per week, a kilogram and a half, and 2 kilograms per week. Here's the basically the amount of calories. If from their point of view, which is primarily a caloric restriction, so I just reduce the amount I eat, how much would I need to reduce my consumption per day to achieve that goal? And then I was like, well, remembering, first off, one assumption, I was like, let's assume that at the moment I am at a state of equilibrium and that I'm eating the same amount of energy as my body is using. I don't think that's a great assumption, because if I'm looking to lose weight, chances are I've recently gained weight, which would indicate that I've actually been eating more than my energy demands, and hence why my body has stored that extra energy as fat. But let's just assume everything's balanced at the moment. And then remembering that these are meal replacement shakes, when you include the skim milk, they're about 250 calories per serve. So then I started to look at some takeaway options and some ready-made meal options, some sandwiches, things you might get from an office cafeteria, and was like, well, if I swap these meals for a shake, what sort of saving do I make? And I got to the point where if I was just doing it from a food side, if I was just addressing that one side, it was going to be absolutely very unlikely that I would be able to get those 2 kilograms per week by just swapping out foods. And part of the reason for that is I've done nothing to address how much energy my body is actually using. And so say before starting the program, this is how much body my energy uses, and I'm eating at about here. Under that scenario, I would be gaining weight. And let's say I substitute some meals with shakes, and I brought this back down, but unless I get it below this line, I'm not actually going to start tapping into my body's energy stores, which is what the fat that I have, and I'm not actually going to lose that weight. So if it's just here, I'm going to slow down how much weight I'm gaining, but I need to really bring it down. So that got me thinking, well, from an exercise point of view, how do I increase the amount of energy that I burn? Because a lot of people would say, well, I'll just go for a jog. And as we saw from the previous slide, like 30 minutes of jogging is not a lot of energy that it's burning. So here are some ways that you can turn your body into a bigger engine so that it burns more energy. The first one is, well, this equation here, when we look at how we can calculate and estimate how much energy our body needs, a big factor in that is how much muscle we actually have. That's also backed up in the second table. So the more muscle we have, the more energy we use. That makes sense. If we were an engine, muscle is how big our engine is. Unfortunately, with age, and as we sort of don't use our muscles regularly, our body tends to break them down, and that's called sarcopenia. So what that means is, as we're getting older, if we're not making sure to maintain or even grow our muscles, our energy use over time will go down, which will make it harder and harder for us to stay at a healthy weight. So that's the first thing. If we want to increase the amount of energy we use, we either want to gain the amount of muscle we have, or if we're not looking to put on muscle, we need to make sure that we're not losing the muscle we have. We want to make sure that we keep our energy levels constant. And to do that, we need to do strength training. We don't have to do a lot, but we need to do some weekly strength training. And then secondly, let's talk about when people say fitness or cardiorespiratory fitness, that is basically how good our lungs and our hearts work at getting oxygen in and moving it to places it needs to go in the body, and then taking the CO2 out of the body because we don't want that. And what does that actually mean? Well, there's this thing called the respiratory quotient, and it's basically a measure of how much this is a balance between the CO2 coming out and the oxygen coming in. And what that tells us is, at that point in time, how much of our energy that our body is producing, how much is coming from carbohydrate, how much is coming from fat, and how much is coming from protein. And if we want to, lose weight, if we want to make sure that we're burning fat, we want to make sure that we're using more fat than carbohydrate. And how we do that is by getting fitter. And now, if you remember, in one of my other videos, I spoke about that there were 3 energy systems that their role is to build together the ATP molecules to let our body use them for energy. We've got the phosphate energy system, we've got the lactate energy system, and that energy system uses glycogen, which are carbohydrates, and no oxygen, and the byproduct is lactic acid. And the key one from a weight loss perspective is the aerobic energy system. Now, the aerobic energy system, it requires oxygen, and it uses carbohydrates in the form of glycogen and fat. It is the only energy system where fat is oxidized to give us fuel. So imagine I'm huffing and I'm puffing because I've just gone and done some exercise. What that is signifying is my body is short on oxygen. I'm trying to get more oxygen in. I'm trying to get more CO2 out. So the fitter I get, the less time I spend huffing and puffing and gasping for air, and the more time I spend oxidizing fat for energy. So there we go. Honestly, I just want to close with this. If it was as simple as taking a pill, a powder, or a shake, I don't think there would be many overweight people there. It's not that, but it is really quite simple what we can do. We can make sure we do some regular strength training. Doesn't have to be for long. We're just doing enough to either gain muscle or maintain muscle. And then secondly, we improve our fitness by doing high intensity huffing and puffing exercises, because our heart is a muscle, and we're working that out similar to how we're working our muscles out when we lift. And then that means the heart gets better at pumping blood, which means it gets better at moving oxygen and CO2 out, which means we can spend more time burning fat and less time burning carbohydrates, which means we can also perform better at our sport. So that is Food is Fuel episode 4. Thank you very much for watching.